President Biden lays out the plans for his final 6 months in office in an Oval Office address.
And Fox 5 political analyst Ric Epps joins us this morning. First of all, good morning. Thank you for being here.
Good morning. Good to see you.
Okay, so the president surrounded by his family as he spoke. What did you think about his address?
I thought it was proper and a great way to sort of culminate and address the nation with why he stepped down and did it in a way that I thought was reasonably graceful. It could have gone a lot of different ways, and I thought he handled it very well, I thought, overall, in terms of setting up the framework for his legacy and what it means going forward.
Let's talk a little bit about this legacy that he leaves, given this decision and how he's deciding to step aside, which we heard him talking about yesterday. How will his legacy be left for the American people?
Well, last week I addressed and I said that, he's a man who loves his country, right? And I said that's why I thought he would probably step away. And I really think that's really the essence of the human being he is, that he's a person who really tries to work with other groups. He has successfully worked with other people across the aisle throughout his almost 50 years actually over 50 years in politics. He's been one of the great social justice presidents that we've had in recent years. He's addressed global issues like climate change. When you look around all the political bantering of all that's behind the scenes things, it's easy to go and point at the things that didn't go so well. But collectively, if you look at his body of work, and frequently with presidents, it's usually the case that the legacy is usually driven after they're out of office, right? So all the political bantering and pushing and shoving while they're in office leaves when they actually look back and reflect on the individual. And I think they'll look at an individual who collectively really loved his country and did the right thing and set his ego and personal ambitions aside for that.
So he has 6 months left in office.
Yeah.
How does he make the most of that? And this is, by the way, there are calls for him to step down immediately because people are saying you're unfit to be in office for the last 6 months. I mean, how is this going to play out?
It's an interesting political play. I would say that there is a logic path to stepping down, resigning early, potentially because that would set Kamala Harris up as the incumbent coming into a presidential race. That's a different space to be in the last few months. But also, maybe not a good space because trying to run a campaign in the midst of trying to govern the world, if you would, is a pretty difficult position. I think he'll navigate the last few months. He's only got 90 days. I mean, or maybe longer, say 6 months, but after the election, things really start to, there's an exit strategy, right? So it's really an off-ramp. So for 90 days, he's just got to hold it together, and he's got a really great staff around him of people to advise him. I think he's really going to, now that he doesn't have to worry about elections and things, he can now try to create the legacy, whatever that's going to be for him. Which I know in the forefront of that is trying to get a ceasefire agreement with Hamas and Israel. And if he can secure that over the next 6 months, I think that'll be considered a big legacy win for him.
Yeah, but there is somebody that now does have to worry about that campaign, and it's the vice president, from having to pick her own vice president to figuring out where she's going to stand on many issues, and we'll get to Hamas and Israel in just a moment. How did his speech set up what we heard from the vice president?
I mean, he said that he supported her, and that was great. He really didn't focus too much on her as much as he tried to formulate the path for the legacy of the sort of policy legacy that he wants to drive forward. I think that it's going to be interesting for Kamala in the sense that she's going to have to decide how much of Joe Biden's identity she wants to carry forward right over the next several months and into her own administration. And then how does she also create her own independent identity that will allow for her to be able to look like she's not Joe Biden Jr., right? Because remember, she's been pushed aside quite a bit throughout this administration. So she really has to be able to create her identity and let the American people see what she really is about. Part of that I know is she has a very strong humanitarian sense. And it's going to be interesting to see how, again, how that plays out and how well it plays with the American public over the next 6 months.
You talk about that humanitarian sense. She was also recently calling for a ceasefire and what's happening with Israel and Hamas. Let's talk a little bit about this. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addressing Congress yesterday. She wasn't there. The president wasn't there. How are things going to change over the next, few months?
This is political theater, right? Netanyahu took an opportunity that was offered to him by Secretary Mike Johnson, right, to come in and speak, and he took it. This is the 4th time that he's been here. And the last time was 2015. It was to try to undermine the Iran nuclear deal. So now he's coming in trying to garner support for continuing the war in Gaza. It's politically charged. It creates a lot of tension for Biden on a certain level and Kamala Harris. Because it's already well known that he's more of a supporter of Trump. He has been. And he's meeting with, of course, Biden today and Kamala Harris today, and then tomorrow morning he's meeting with Trump. He's got to play a very careful game here, because now that we've got 2 people on the table where it's going to be more competitive in the presidential race, it's going to be interesting to see how he holds his cards. There's a tremendous amount of pressure, and Biden right now is saying, to his staff, that he believes that they're close to an agreement. Well, that agreement doesn't serve Netanyahu very well. It doesn't serve him well at home, and it doesn't serve him well here, particularly with the hostages still there. And with the logic path of wanting total victory, which sounds like a wonderful idea, but total victory in this situation, which for him is eradication of Hamas, getting the hostages back, and getting rid of all the weapons that Hamas has. And then so the issue is, can you really objectively achieve all those things? Can you actually completely get rid of Hamas? Even if you got the hostages back, can you really get rid of Hamas? Can you really get rid of all the weapons? And if you can't, that means you have a war without end, right? Because there's no off-ramp for this unless somebody has to stop. It doesn't serve his political interests to stop, because his numbers have plummeted in Israel. So it becomes much more problematic for him. So he's got to play the game until he decides, or so we see who wins in November in this election.
And quickly, before we let you go, would you say that he accomplished what he came for by speaking yesterday?
Actually, I think he may have had the opposite effect. I don't think he gained any more support than he already had. The United States always supports Israel's right to exist and its security. Doesn't mean we have to agree with all the policies, right? So you can agree with, hey, Israel deserves to be Israel. It doesn't mean that we have to support the crisis that's what's going on in Gaza right now. And I think that's the departure that we as American public have to recognize, is that there is a difference in that. And the last thing I'll say with that is that, so his very sort of bombastic and defensive attitude and calling out the protesters and saying that they were, idiots for Iran and the adversaries, that doesn't fly well in the face of for him to have relative success and gain more support within the framework of the political structure of our country. So I think he probably hurt himself more than he helped himself, to be honest.
We'll continue to watch it all. Ric Epps, thank you. Always good to see you.
Great to see you.